Hi, I'm going to read a short story as part of practice for speech team. If you're reading this, please comment to offer criticism. I am doing this to time myself, to watch myself do it and see if I make funny faces when I talk. So please comment on anything that you see that you think I should correct. I don't care. I mean, more constructive than you suck, but I'm kind of desperate at this point. So if you're watching this, thank you for doing so. And here I go. Life is difficult for impoverished minorities, more so for impoverished minorities living in constant danger of attack. The following short story illustrates the lives of Russian Jews and shows how a late train and an act of God saved an entire village. Sholem Aleichem, a wedding without musicians. The last time I told you about our straggler special, I described the miracle of the Hashano Rabo. This time I shall tell you about another miracle in which the straggler special figured, how thanks to the straggler special the town of Hussein was saved from a terrible fate. This took place during the days of the Constitution when reprisals against Jews were going on everywhere. Though I must tell you that the Jews of Hussein have never been afraid of pogroms. Why? Simply because there is no one in town who can carry out a pogrom. Of course, you can imagine that if we looked very hard, we could find one or two volunteers who wouldn't deny themselves the pleasure of ventilating us a little, that is, breaking our bones or burning down our houses. For example, when reports of pogroms began drifting in, the few squires, who are enemies of our people, wrote confidential letters to the proper authorities, saying it might be a good idea if something were done in Hussein also, but since there was no one here to do it, would they be so kind to send help? In other words, would they dispatch some people as quickly as possible? And before another 24 hours had passed, a reply came, also confidentially, that people were being sent. From where? From Zerminko, from Kazatan, from Razdilno, Dilno, Popelno, other such places that had distinguished themselves in beating up Jews. Do you want to know how we learned of this terrible secret? We found out through a regular source of news, Noah Tikhonovi. Noah Tikhonovi is a man whom God endowed with a pair of extra long legs, and he uses them to good purpose. He never rests and is seldom found at home. He is always busy with 1,000 things, and most of them have to do with other people's business rather than his own. By trade, he is a printer, and because he is the only printer in Hussein, he knows all the squires and police and has dealing with officialdom and all their secrets. Noah Tikhonovi spread the good news all over town. He told the secret to one person at a time, in strictest confidence, of course, saying, "I am telling this only to you. I wouldn't tell it to anyone else." And that was how the whole town became aware of the fact that a mob of hooligans was on the way and that a plan for beating up Jews had been worked out. The plan told exactly when they would start, on which day, at which hour, and from which point, and by what means. Everything to the last detail. You can imagine what terror this struck in our hearts. Panic spread quickly, and among whom do you think it spread first? Among the poor, of course. It's a peculiar thing about poor people. When a rich man is afraid of a pogrom, you can understand why. He is afraid, poor fellow, that he will be turned into a pauper. But those of you who are already paupers, what do you have to be afraid of? What have you got to lose? But you should have seen how they bundled up their children and packed up their belongings and began running hither and yon, looking for a place to hide. Where can a person hide? This one hides in a friendly peasant's cellar, another in the notary's attic, and a third in the director's office. At the factory, everyone finds a spot for himself. I was the only one in town who wasn't anxious to hide. I am not boasting about my bravery, but this is the way I see it. What's the sense in being afraid of a pogrom? I don't say that I am a hero. I might have been willing to hide, too, when the hour of reckoning came. But I asked myself first, how can I be sure that during the slaughter the friendly peasant in whose cellar I was hiding, or the notary, or the director of the factory himself wouldn't... You understand. And all that aside, how can you leave a town wide open like that? It's no trick to run away. You have to see about doing something. But alas, what can a Jew do? He appeals to a friendly official, and that is just what we did. In every town, there is at least one friendly official you can appeal to. We had one too, the inspector of police, a jewel of a fellow, willing to listen to us and willing to accept a gift on occasion. We went to the inspector with the proper gifts and asked for his protection. He reassured us at once. He told us to go home and sleep in peace. Nothing would happen. Sounds good, doesn't it? But we still had our walking newspaper, Noah, who was broadcasting another secret through the length and breadth of town. The secret was that a telegram had just arrived. He swore by everything holy that he had seen it himself. And in that telegram, only one word, Yidium, an ugly word. It means simply, we are coming. We ran back to the inspector. Your Honor, we told him, it looks bad. What looks bad? He asked. And we told him, a telegram has just arrived. From where? We told him. And what does it say? We told him, Yidium. At this he burst out laughing. You are big fools, he said. Only yesterday I ordered a regiment of Cossacks from Cholchin. When we heard this, we breathed more easily. When a Jew hears that a Cossack is coming, he takes courage. He can face the world again. The question remained, who would arrive first? The Cossacks from Telchin or the hooligans from Zerminko? Common sense told us that the hooligans would arrive first because they were coming by train while the Cossacks were coming on horseback. But we pinned our full hopes on the straggler special. God is merciful. He would surely perform a miracle and the straggler would be at least a few hours late. That wasn't too much to hope for, since it happened nearly every day. But this one time it looked as though the miracle would not take place. The straggler kept going from station to station as regular as a clock. You can imagine how we felt when we learned, confidentially of course, from Noah to Konovoy that a telegram had arrived from the last station, from Krishtapovkova. Yidium, it said, not just Yidium, but Yidium with a hurrah in front of it. Naturally, we took this last bit of news straight to the inspector. We begged him not to rely on the Cossacks, who might or might not arrive from Tolchin sometime, but to send police to the station, at least for the sake of appearances, so that our enemies wouldn't think that we were completely at their mercy. The inspector listened to our pleas. He did what we asked and more. He got himself up in full uniform with all his orders and medals and took the whole police force, as the gendarme and his assistant, to the station with him to meet the train. But our enemies weren't asleep either. They put on their full uniforms, complete with ribbons and medals, took a couple of priests along, and came also to meet the train. The inspector asked them sternly, what are you doing here? And they asked him the same question. What are you doing here? And they bandied words back and forth, and the inspector let them know in no uncertain terms that their trouble was for nothing. As long as he was in charge, there would be no pogrom in Hussein. They listened, smiling knowingly, and answered with insolence, We shall see. Just then, a train was heard from the distance. The sound struck terror into our hearts. We waited for another whistle to blow, and after that the shouts of hurrah! What would happen after the hurrah we knew only too well from heresy. We waited, but heard nothing more. What had happened? The sort of thing that could only happen with the straggler special. When the straggler special drew into the station, the engineer stopped the locomotive, stepped out calmly, and made his way towards the buffet. We met him halfway. Well, my good fellow, and where are the cars? Which cars? Can't you see that you are here with the locomotive and without cars? He stared at us. What do I care about cars? They are the business of the crew. Where's the crew? How should I know where the crew is? The conductor blows the whistle when he is ready, and I whistle back to let him know that I am starting, and off we go. I don't have an extra pair of eyes in the back of my head to see what's going on behind me. That was his story, and according to that he was right. But right or wrong, there stood the straggler special without cars and without passengers. In other words, it was a wedding without musicians. Later, we learned that a bunch of hooligans had been on their way to Hussein, all of them hand-picked youth, armed to the teeth with clubs and knives and other weapons. Their spirits were high and liquor flowed freely. The last station, Krishtapovka, they invited the crew to join them and treated everyone to drinks, the conductor, the firemen, the gendarmes. But in the midst of this revelry, they forgot one little detail, to couple the cars back to the locomotive. And so the locomotive went off at the usual time to Hussein, and the rest of the straggler specials remained standing in Krishtapovka. Neither the hooligans nor the passengers nor the crew noticed that they were standing still. They continued to empty bottle after bottle and to make merry until the station master suddenly noticed that the locomotive had gone off and left the cars behind. He spread the alarm and the crew came tumbling out. A hue and cry was raised. The hooligans blamed the crew blamed the hooligans, but what good did it do? At last they decided that the only thing to do was to set out for Hussein on foot. They took heart and began marching towards Hussein, singing and shouting as they went. And so they arrived in their usual good form, singing and yelling and brandishing their clubs, but it was already too late. In the streets of Hussein, the Cossacks from Tulchin were riding up and down on horseback with whips in their hands. Within half an hour, one of the hooligans remained in town. They ran off like rats in a famine. They melted like ice in summer. Now I ask you, didn't the straggler special deserve to be showered with gold, or at least written up? Thank you. Okay. As I said, any comments or critiques you have would be wonderful. Specifically, the things I'm concerned about are my posture, my gestures, whether I'm speaking too fast, pronunciation, eye contact, basically everything. So, again, if you have anything to offer to me at all, I would be grateful to hear your opinions. Alright, thank you. Have a nice day. Psh.